next year or so. And for that, we're going to have Dr. Rakesh Sinha, who's going to give us his time as well. So please welcome him. He's from Godrej Consumables. And Javin from Sinha, and Arif Siddiqui from Coin. Okay, welcome. Don't sit on that. Sorry. We did have a few more people to join us, but unfortunately some people haven't been able to make it. So the idea of this discussion really is to try and find out from some experts in the field how they're looking at the future, particularly 2018 leading into 2019. But everybody seems to have deadlines at 220 and 222. In actual fact, Mr. Gadkari made a comment the other day that was in the newspaper, that he is going to remove 28 million commercial vehicles from the road before 2022. Now, so what are we going to do with the 28 million drivers that are currently moving them? Or the 15 million small businesses that those vehicles belong to that will never get finance from their bank to buy a new vehicle? But that statement is incredible, so somebody needs to be thinking about that in an innovative way. So for this discussion, we would like you to ask as many questions as you possibly can from the team. But first of all, I think we'll just take just a couple of minutes from each person to actually get their understanding and thinking behind what the immediate and near future looks like. So we'll start with Dr. Rakesh, if you don't mind. Okay? Yep. Yeah, presentation is ready.
Hello, can you hear me? Good morning, and my apologies for a very bad throat that I have. So anytime if something is not clear, feel free to ask me. I have a very small presentation. It's not going to be a Gyan session on what is supply chain innovation, because all of you are practitioners of supply chain. All of you are in the thick of things of what's happening in the supply chain. What I will try to do over the next 2-3 slides is, the titles are not coming somehow. I don't know. So the titles are not showing up there. So the title is Supply Chain Innovation, the trends that will define 2018. Yeah, so I've just tried to, I'm not an expert who can define what the trends will be. All of us read about it. I have two more real experts, Jamin and Arif, who will talk about the supply chain trends and the innovation that is coming up in the area of supply chain. I have just tried to give a small framework to the areas in which, or the dimensions on which innovation will be useful, and that's just a starting point for discussion. It's not the end of discussion, just to provoke some thoughts into what could be innovated, what has been innovated, and what could be termed as a good innovation. Seems to be some technical glitch. Anyway, even if the titles are not coming up, you can still show. I remember the titles of the slides. So yeah. Slide changer. Can you move the slide, please? The first of the 4-5 slides only that I have. That innovation matters only when we see it from the eyes of the consumer. If the innovation in any supply chain function doesn't add value to the consumer, or the consumers don't see any value in it, then it's not an innovation. It's just a theoretical invention which has no practical meaning unless we can relate it to the consumer benefit. And not only we should be able to relate it to a consumer benefit, the consumers themselves should see a benefit in it for themselves. So all the supply chain innovation that we will talk about today and the trends which are defining the innovation, thank you, are really the trends as seen from the eyes of the consumer. Many times we have seen great innovations which the innovators say will change the entire world, but consumers have not accepted it. I won't call it an innovation, and that's not likely to become a trend. So any innovation which is useful to the consumer as seen by the consumer is an innovation. That's the filter that we will use in today's discussion. Now there are three dimensions in which innovations will be important, in my opinion. This is my personal opinion. One, in terms of flexibility. So when you talk of supply chains of future, we see a lot of rigidity in several areas of the supply chain. And these rigidities can be as simple as if you want the delivery on the same day, you must order before 10 o'clock in the morning. We are not being flexible. Or if you order from a location outside these pin codes, you are not eligible for the same day delivery. There are several places where the moment we provide more flexibility in terms of the timing of delivery, in terms of place of delivery, in terms of the assortment which the consumer can order, every bit of flexibility as seen by the consumer adds to the benefit of the consumer. And there are a lot of places where innovation has been done, as we will see, but there are a lot of places where innovation is yet to be done. So the first company which brings out innovation in those areas which make life better and more flexible for the consumer in terms of interacting with the company will win. The second innovation dimension, is, can we move it to the next, is in terms of speed of response. There are a lot of innovations earlier. If you remember, just a few years back or a few months back, if you order something on Flipkart or Amazon, we had to wait for 5 days, 6 days. Then we moved to the same day delivery concept. So the previous one, previously. Yeah, okay, let it be. So the second dimension is the fast supply chains. As supply chains are getting faster, they are becoming more useful to the consumer, and any innovation to speed up the entire supply chain from vendor to the consumer is going to be useful. The third is in the area of sustainability. If we are not taking care of the environment, of the people, of the society, then any innovation is not going to be sustainable. So it has to be any innovation in the area of providing more flexibility, higher speed. The common thing has to be that innovation has to be sustainable. Otherwise, it's not going to last over the next decade or a century as such. Talking of flexibility, the consumers are asking for flexibility in assortment, in terms of delivery time, in terms of the place of delivery, in terms of the ease of return. There are so many things the consumers are asking, and we have seen some innovation. These are just a sample that if you want to really give infinite assortment, one of the technologies that is going to be useful in future is a 3D printing, where you don't need to keep inventory of items. Whatever the consumer is asking, you can really manufacture closer to the consumer and deliver. It is not yet fully exploited, but I think companies are moving in the right direction to move in terms of higher assortment. It's already being used for the spare parts for automobiles to a large extent. Delivery time slots, yes, some companies are saying that if a consumer wants the goods to be delivered between 5 and 6 p.m. in the evening, they will follow that. So that's again a very good thing in terms of flexibility. Then in terms of the place of pickup, we have seen lockers coming up all over the place that you can click and collect it from a petrol pump or from a local subway station. Some companies, e-com companies, are establishing lockers in the housing societies. So housing society has 50 apartments. They would install 4 or 5 lockers. So the moment you order and mention, they will assign a particular locker and deliver inside that with a passcode given to you. So go there, open the locker, and then take out your code. That's giving tremendous flexibility. Some lockers are getting established in colleges, like Amazon Hub is doing that. Car boots, this is still at innovation level where Amazon and Audi have got a patent to ensure that if you say that my car is parked at this parking location, they would have a way to open the boot of your car, the key of your car, and keep the parcel inside. So the cars which Audi is manufacturing come with an extra key, which can be opened only by some of the service providers like DHL, and Amazon parcels can be put in. It's like the TSA lock which we have in the luggage, which only the airport security people can open. Nobody else can open that lock. So the cars are coming with that type of lock. This is ultimate in terms of convenience. You order and the parcel is in your car. Drones, parachutes, n number of innovations coming up so that it can be delivered in your balcony through drones. You don't even have to open the door of your house. Even if you are not at home, parcels can still be delivered. In terms of fast supply chains, the consumers are asking for ease of ordering, faster fulfillment, and some of the innovation we have seen in terms of ease of ordering, the subscription model that we have seen in terms of Dollar Shave, where once you subscribe, you don't have to keep ordering every month. Your monthly requirements come to you every month through, and your account gets debited. Amazon Dash button, where they provided a Tide Dash button on the washing machines. So the moment you use the washing machine and you find the detergent has got over, the last spoon of detergent has been used, you just press that button and a fresh consignment of Tide will be delivered to your house. So all this is for ease of ordering. We have seen Subway click and order, where at the subway stations there are large billboards where you can just click the items with all the items displayed, hundreds and thousands of items. We just click the items that you need, and those can be delivered to either to the locker or to your home. Lot of automation in warehouse manufacturing in terms of robotics, drones, and blockchain. Blockchain, especially for longer consignments which are traveling across continents, blockchain is effectively used to speed up the paperwork for the time being. So all the port clearances, the bill of lading, the customs clearances, all that is much, much faster by using the blockchain technology. It's still at infant stage, but going forward, it will find its way in terms of any consignment moving from any place to any place and speed up all the paperwork and clearances. Sustainability, consumers are asking for less packaging, non-polluting items, and ease of disposal for the products. And some of the innovation which some of us would have seen is like delivering cold drinks in bottles to delivering in fountains, where you go to a restaurant and, like, I don't know, there's Pepsi or Coke, you find a Pepsi fountain where there is no bottle, you just collect your Pepsi from there and use it. That's much more sustainable, recyclable, biodegradable packaging, and even now edible packaging are coming up. So you buy an edible thing, even the packaging can be eaten up after you finish the work. All this is in the area of sustainability. Just a glimpse of the type of future technologies which are coming up. There is no end to the list or the examples that we can think of. Just to provoke some thoughts, and my two colleagues, Javin and Arif, will have their own views on what is innovation and how the future of supply chain looks like. So that's all I had to say in my opening remarks. We'll hear from Javin and Arif, and then we will have a discussion, taking your questions. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thank you. This work? This work. Okay, good. Great. Thank you very much. Interesting. Some of those points, I'm sure everybody talks about all of those things and is looking for some changes. I don't get my Amazon package fast enough, or the things I can't find on one site if I'll search it on the other. But there are some very negative sides to this. Okay, one of the big failures in e-commerce in this country is a little bit too much choice and too much pricing differentiators between sites. So for instance, if you look or you go to Flipkart, which I know very well, and you see they have a lot of returns which never actually got to the client, because the client has the opportunity of, while I'm ordering this phone, okay, and I'm taking it at 25,000 rupees, if on Amazon it's 23, I cancel that. So the outbound never even made it to the client before this ultra convenient opportunity came up for them to order it 2,000 rupees cheaper from Amazon. This is a serious problem. Okay, and the public actually are utilizing this to actually gain great benefit, personal benefit, but seriously screwing those people that are doing the job and those people that are selling. So some of these aspects of innovation that people are coming up with, they have really negative sides as well as far as business is concerned. And there are a lot of difficulties. What if it goes in a locker and is subsequently refused? It then has to go through a whole set of chain of events to get it out of the locker if they don't want to go pick it up. Because it's a one-way key to get in a locker. I open, take, close. Okay, that's how the lockers work. So there, some of these things that we're talking about also have some negative sides. So innovation can do great for one aspect of the public or the business, etc., and can actually agree a great penalty for the other side. So we have to think about that as well. Okay, Arif.
Morning. Before we talk about the innovations and the trends of 2018 and 2020, etc., I think the first thing is that we need to get these cables properly connected. If we have situations where we have one screen working and the other not working, loose cable connections, I think the point is that we need to first address these issues rather than we talk in 2018. And these problems are actually, this is just an example, but these problems are actually the real issues in India. Most of the issues around visibility, okay, most of the issues about non-functioning of either equipment, technology, or otherwise, are all related to a loose connection. You lose that vital byte of a news item just because there's a loose connection. The CCTV doesn't capture the face of the thief just because the connection went loose, and so on and so forth. So the big challenge here is to get the connections right. Now, assuming that we've got all those connections right, and what's happening in this country is that we're having huge proliferation of product around the supply chain. The challenges in supply chain continue to remain as they are. However, there is huge bombardment of technology, concepts, evolution of the information systems, etc., are continuously happening. One of my main agenda today to describe what will happen in 2018 is that there has been a huge rush in the past 10 years. We need to look at what will happen in 18 and beyond 18 in 3 different silos. The first silo would be, what will the big boys do, the top 500 companies do? Fine. For them, the definition of 2018 and what we are going to do in 2018 will be different from the second silo, which is the service provider who connects the product with the customer. The logistics companies, the 3PL companies, the cargo companies, and so on and so forth, who actually connect the physical part of the product with the customer, the consumer. They will have a different agenda for the 2018 and beyond. And the third is the very large segment which actually drives the GDP of the country is the SME, the small and medium enterprise. The small and medium enterprise is going to have a completely different agenda, with respect to what they have on the plate to address in 2018 in terms of trends and evolutions and innovations and so on and so forth. So, yes, what the A will do, which is the top 500, they will be busy trying to figure out how to orchestrate the data that they have already been collecting through the huge big data initiatives and all the collections of information that has happening, and then trying to simulate that data and trying to make it meaningful through either artificial intelligence, where billions of bytes of data is collected in a short period of time, and the blink of an eye you are able to get some sort of a decision metrics, around artificial intelligence systems. So that's what is going to predominantly happen, in my opinion, as far as 2018 is concerned, and the big guys are going to be busy on that side. As far as the service providers are concerned, I think they will continue to remain confused and foxed. In my opinion, the service providing organizations would not really know whether they need to invest in artificial intelligence, machine learning. Do they need to continue to invest in infrastructure? Do they need to invest in something which is very specific to a customer? Is there a return on investment on that? Is the payback going to be 3 years, 5 years, 10 years? So they will remain in a huge dilemma of how much and to what extent do they need to deep dive in innovation and technology and so on and so forth, because they are more on a pay-by-use revenue model. So they will continue to remain foxed and confused in 2018. However, there will be these large or industry-specific service providers who would have the critical mass to take that leap and will start making way. Once technology becomes, and the new technologies I'm talking about, the technology of the new age, when these technologies become more and more popular and they have huge consumer bases, then they will become cheaper. And I can see that happening around 2022, when most of what we are talking about today will become the norm of business. Finally, let's come to what the SMEs are going to do. What will be the trends with the SMEs? The SMEs have grown at a very high pace in the past 10 years. They have also tripled, quadrupled, maybe 10, 20 times the revenue that they actually had 10 years back or 5 years back. However, they did not plunge into new infrastructure. They did not get new plants and manufacturing centers. They did not put up large warehouses and stocking points. They had no idea of how to manage inventory. Right? They had nothing called as returns with them. Now, all these things are slowly acting as impediments, in their overall growth. And the SMEs are now going to spend in infrastructure. In the year 18, we see that a large amount of infrastructure spending will take place by the SMEs. They will put up resources, technologies, and they're going to bring up a lot of equipment to start doing business. They will bring in a lot of intelligence to start doing smaller activities, but high volume activities. So a lot of SMEs are going to be doing a lot of spend in basic and I would say midterm innovation is what I feel. Finally, a lot of impetus has been given on skilling. Okay. Unfortunately, corporates, I was just discussing in one of the, early in the day with some of our colleagues here, that corporates have unfortunately not been able to clearly decipher or segregate two elements of training. One, we have something called as corporate training in companies, where there's a corporate training calendar, which talks about soft skills. However, we tend to confuse ourselves with skilling otherwise, which is much more of building capability. Capability building of how to do your business, how to manage a particular transaction, how to operate a machine, how to operate a warehouse management system, or how to operate a warehouse solution or an automation machine, etc., is more about the skilling that companies are going to be investing in this in this year and the years to come. So therefore, skilling will become the gap of skill will continue to become larger, and therefore we will have to ensure that we run towards bridging this gap. I can see a lot of companies who are now gearing up to see that they identify these specific skill sets where skilling will happen, They will not only look at organizations, which are training companies, etc., but they will be in-house skilling capabilities that will get created. So this is where I see 2018. Obviously, we're also sitting in the glory of the post-GST era, and a lot of us seem to have figured out how to manage the GST taxation part of the GST, and where to save the tax and where to do that, because that's what we are very good at. But the point is that I don't think that we have yet got the physicality of post GST in terms of the number of distribution centers and our CFAs and dealers, and that network completely sorted out. I think that's still pending at the overall business level. So a lot of companies are going to spend a lot of time in 2018-19 in trying to figure out that, and getting, probably peeping on what the competition is doing, and then trying to replicate stuff out here and there. So a lot of time we're now going to spend on the post GST era in the next 1 or 2 years, and trying to set up distribution centers, and then start reacting to the volumes that you will then probably have to manage out of the consolidation that you may have done. However, I just making a side note, there is not going to be a large consolidation that's going to take place. In my forecast says that. I predict that we are not going to get from 40 warehouses or 35 warehouses to 7 or 8 or 15. I think that time is completely over. That was maybe 8 years back as a concept, but today, time to market, consumer preferences and all that are carrying over and becoming the key drivers to decision making. So this is these are some of the things that I felt. Lastly, the point which you made on sustainability, I think Rakesh was a fantastic aspect. Today, I don't really think that supply chain managers, and if some of you are here, I don't know how many supply chain managers or supply chain or warehouse managers are sitting out here, but I don't think there's any effort being given on sustainability. If you look at the environment from a supply chain perspective, this is something which is continuously going to become a challenge, for supply chain professionals to be able to manage. There is a huge amount of pollution that we continue to do. Packaging is something which I don't really think that we're really focusing on sustainable packaging per se, and we continue to bleed the environment. And my opinion would be that regardless of what we've stated in terms of technology initiatives, etc., sustainability and supply chain sustainability is something which you should passionately, as individuals and professionals in this business, should look at and take that as an agenda point, personal agenda point in your workplace, so that we don't continue to abuse this beautiful earth and the mother nature. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much. Just on the last point there, sustainability. In actual fact, there's only one new, as far as I know, you can correct me, one new Indian company that has come into the supply chain arena in the last 3 years that is focusing entirely on sustainability and the utilization and optimization of unit load containers and returnable packaging. Anybody know the name of the company? The company is called Leap India, and they're from Bombay. Okay, and Sonu Matthew has created an environment where he's working with some of the top names in the country, entirely on a returnable packaging basis and on an operational cost basis. So this is a rentable proposition. So who knows about the company CHEP? Anybody? Okay, so those of you that know a little bit about CHEP, you will understand a little bit about Leap India. So there's a fantastic opportunity for companies who are designing their supply chain, looking at network optimization, and working with new software for accounting of returnable packaging, to actually work with a company like Leap India and actually reduce your cost at the same time. But those people who look at things on a short term, and those people who simply focus on this month's budget, actually they won't like some of these operational imperatives of the future, because when you look at it against where you are today, it does look, I have to say, more costly. And the reason it looks more costly is because the person looking at it looks at it as a transport initiative or as a warehousing initiative. This is useless. If you want to do something in the supply chain and you want to make a difference, you have to understand the end-to-end cost of the supply chain. because the fact your warehouse is exploding and you've got too much stock in it has got nothing to do with the warehouse operations teams. It's got to do with those lunatics at the head office that have screwed up the forecasting and demand planning. So if you don't understand what they're doing, how can you talk about the costs in your warehouse? So you should look at end-to-end costing. And when you look at end-to-end costing, you're then in sustainability, because then you're looking at unit load containers, returnable packaging, optimizing RFID, the flow of information, the reduction of wheels on the road, and therefore the carbon footprint going down. But if you don't understand your end-to-end cost, you're screwed. You cannot just talk about one element of it. You have to talk about everything. Okay, Javan.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. And it's good to be here. Thanks to the organizers, thanks to all my co-speakers who've actually made my job a bit easier, because I'm just going to probably touch upon with some few examples the topics which have already been covered. So let me start with the last point which was made. And if we look at sustainability, there are two paths to any theory. For example, let's be clear about that. So one is the whole society impacting part, and one is the things that we can do in our own companies. Okay, so the example that was just given was things that we can do in our own companies. Of course, there are things in innovation and packaging which are society impacting. So let me take a cue from that point, before I start. Errors in forecasting and too much inventory and write-offs, and in some of the clients that we've worked with, we've seen, not to name the clients, but we've seen products, let's look at pharmaceutical products, being written off and destroyed by the kilos every month, and the liquids which have expired because of returns from the market being just discarded. Of course, there are practices which the regulators have laid down. But the point I'm really making is, if as supply chain managers, we want to make a difference to the sustainability part, if we are just able to make sure that we plan correctly, from the demand planning, the supply planning, the production planning, the distribution planning. I'm not talking about the actual movement of material. I'm just talking about one simple concept called inventory management. So one of the supply chain innovations that I'm sure, and it's a subject very close to me and close to all of us, I'm sure. If we can just raise our hands and say that I'll ensure that we reduce the amount of returns in my organization. I think if we all just take that oath today before we leave, I think we've done a bit for sustainability. So thanks a lot for that cue. I'm just adding to that. So coming to what I really want to talk about, I'm going to talk about just three things again. Thanks, Arif, again, for telling me the power of three. I'll be just touching upon what my co-speakers have already said. Dr. Sinha and Arif have really covered it all. So the first thing I'm going to talk about in supply chain innovation is disintermediation. Now, we've all heard of Uber, we've all heard of Ola. And let me tell you, these are fantastic examples, and if as supply chain managers we can take this point home and think about it, how can supply chain disintermediation lead to better customer service, lowering of costs, and overall a better planet? So according to me, Uber and Ola are the best examples of supply chain innovation, isn't it? I mean, how many times a simple thing, and supply chain innovation need not only be restricted to products, okay, even services. So calling a taxi was a pain, sometimes still is today. But here comes a company and says, you know what, just tap a button on your phone and a cab is at your doorstep in 2 minutes. Now, isn't that a supply chain innovation? So if that isn't, then what can be? So let's really think about technology and put it in the context of the outcome of that technology. So what Uber has done is not just create an app. Uber has disintermediated the supply chain. Okay, so even if you want to go to Pune, you don't need to call the agent and say, I want to book a cab to Pune. You can even book, I believe, a cab from Ola or Uber today, and it can take you to Pune as well. So the whole idea is that look at your industry, look at the companies that you manage, and ask yourself this question: what supply chain innovation can I do in my company in the area of disintermediation? And disintermediation simply means, it's called by different means, direct to consumer and a lot of other things. How can I reach a product to my customer in the fastest possible time, in the least possible cost? Okay. And let me again look at two parts of the customer. So there is the end customer, but all of us supply chain managers here, managing supply chains. How many supply chain managers, logistic managers? Raise your hands. Not too many hands. So as supply chain managers, if I were to ask you a question, who is your number one customer? Anyone? Who's your first customer? Who's your primary customer? Yes, it is the end customer. It's for the whole organization, the end customer is the customer. But who is your primary customer? Anyone? It's the sales team, isn't it? I mean, as a supply chain manager, if I can keep my sales people happy. And how are they happy? When they get the products they want, in the quantities that they want, at the time that they want, isn't it? So when we talk of supply chain innovation, we also look at how we can keep our internal customers happy, our sales people happy, because they are the first internal customer. So the first topic I want to talk about is disintermediation and what supply chain innovation is going to do there. The second topic I really want to talk about, and it's not path breaking, it's something which we all know, and that's called data. Okay, so we've spoken about disintermediation. Now let's talk about data. Let me give you a small example. In the Grand Prix of the world, so you have the Grand Prix races, the F1 races in the world. For the last 20 years, there used to be deaths happening on the circuit. Okay, so people were losing their lives. So these are high-speed races. And in the period from 1970 to 1985, on an average every year, the number of deaths caused in the Grand Prix was around 10 to 15 globally. And can anyone tell me what was the number of deaths from the period 1990 to 2000 in the Grand Prix? Does anyone have that number? Yes? 2. Thank you so much. Does anyone know the primary reason behind a sharp fall in the number of deaths on the Grand Prix circuit? So do you have any idea? Do you want to share? Sorry? Medical safety. Exactly, that was my first thought. So when I heard this story the first time, and I was asked this question, what is the reason why the number of deaths have dropped? Medical safety, better use of technology on the road, and lots of other things. But you know what is the first thing that this researcher did? So when one particular death happened, the coach of that driver, he took it upon himself to study only one thing, and that was data. So he looked at the last 20 years data, he analyzed the cause of each and every death which happened, shortlisted all the possible causes, and made sure that they were addressed. So whether it was the quality of the road, one of the things very interestingly which he found out is many of the deaths were happening on the turnings. Not due to any fuel or any fire or any mishap, but many of the deaths were actually happening on the turnings because the design of the road was not suited for the car to take the turn in the safest manner. So in the next year's Grand Prix, he approached the authorities and they actually redesigned the tracks. And that one thing which was redesigning the turns on the F1 tracks has saved a lot of lives. Now the point I'm trying to make here is simply this. If data can be so powerful that it can save people's lives, and I'm not talking about cancer research, and I'm not going into the area of medical sciences at all, because that's all about data. And I'm privy to a lot of very important cancer researches happening in the world. I know some of the scientists. The amount of data they use is absolutely the world. But in supply chain, when I work with companies, when I work with a lot of clients, I realize that the use of data is not as much as it can be. Data is powerful. Data is exceedingly powerful. So coming to this topic, 2018, if I can urge each and every one of you, go back to your organizations, look at your data, look at your last 5 years data, try to look for trends. Look for why things are happening the way they are happening. And data speaks. Data absolutely speaks. In one of our recent projects where we looked at a very large retail chain in the area of wellness products. So large retail chain, lots of data. They had on an average 18% unavailability of the product on the retail shelf. 18%. Now that's a huge number. We looked at data, we built frameworks, we built models, and today the company is well on its way to reduce that number to less than 5%. My request to you, gentlemen and ladies, is only this. Do not underestimate the power of data. You need not wait for any big data innovation or technological breakthroughs to happen. You already have the power at your fingertips. You have your ERP systems and whatever systems you have. Please use them efficiently. So that's the second point I wanted to make. As simple as data analytics. The third point is really about integration. And again, drawing a cue from what was said earlier, is looking at the end-to-end supply chain. Most supply chain managers that we've come across have a very limited view of the supply chain. They look at production, or they look at procurement, or they look at transportation, distribution. But it's extremely important today when boundaries are breaking, when it's becoming a global marketplace, so to speak. We look at the topic for today, end-to-end supply chain integration. Now, when we look at integration, it's a tough challenge. You want to integrate your vendors, you want to integrate your suppliers, you want to integrate your dealers, your distributors, and I mean, for those companies which are direct to the customer, how to integrate the customer. So it's not an easy challenge to tackle. It has to be thought through carefully when we are talking of integration. Which suppliers do we really want to integrate? How will the integration with that supplier help? What kind of information will you share? So one of the benefits that we've seen is a simple thing like sharing new product information with our suppliers on time. Now, this client, when the rate of new product introduction in this industry is very high. One of the things which they found tremendous benefit when they looked at integration was to alert their vendors on time whenever they were planning a change in their product. It could be a cosmetic change, it could be a completely new change. But whenever they were able to give visibility through integration to their vendors and suppliers, they were able to have a much more seamless way of working. So the third, if I can call it trend for 2018, or a humble appeal to all of you for 2018 or the years to come, is look at integration with your vendors, suppliers, dealers, distributors in a much more strategic way than it is done today. So it's not just about supplier ne PO bheja hai, payment karna hai. It's not really about just that. And what else can you do with your suppliers and vendors so that you can give the end customer the best service that you can. So these were my 3 messages. Thank you.
Hi, thanks. The end-to-end supply chain, remember what we said about costs, but also the end-to-end supply chain, we should pick up something that was said earlier about people. Because I'm not quite sure if we actually have relationship building along the supply chain between experts in key areas. And this comes down to skilling, education, supply chain training, and a few of those initiatives which some people are looking at, but perhaps not enough people are looking at. So innovation also out on the road. You see we've got trucks outside. People won't see this as innovation. It won't see it as excelling and doing extremely well as far as technology is concerned. But if you go look at those Barrett-Benz vehicles that are out there, or some of those boxes that have been built, there's a lot of great care and very innovative processes that have produced those things. So we should consider every aspect of innovation as far as the supply chain is concerned. So a lot of interesting things come out there. Some things about skilling people, which we haven't probably spoken enough about. We can pick that up later. Packaging, edible packaging I found quite interesting. I can't actually, you pick up a Snicker and just stick the whole thing in your mouth when you pick it off the shelf. That would be quite nice. So actually in my country, I'm Irish by the way, I sound like an Englishman I'm sure. If you go to buy an LG TV or a Samsung TV and you go in the shop and you say, okay, that's what I want, when you arrive at the checkout and someone delivers the item to the checkout, they will ask you, do you want to take that packaging with you? If you say yes, you get an extra bill. And the reason you get an extra bill is because it is the retailer's responsibility to certify that the packaging is disposed of in a compliant way. You can't give that certificate, only the retailer can. So if you're taking the packaging away with you, he has to buy an appropriate certified piece of information from the government to say, Mr. Howard has taken this with him, but he paid me this money, I'm paying it to you, the government, because I can't provide a certificate. This is coming. Okay, if you go and speak to the Karnataka government, this particular initiative I've just told you about, they are seriously considering it. So why, if you're picking up your television and putting it on the nice leather seats of your nice big Lexus, do you really need to take the cardboard box with you? No. Just put it in your Lexus and leave the cardboard box behind so that they can certify its proper disposal. It's coming. Okay. Anybody, any questions please for the panel, or any questions from the panel to the audience? We have asked a few questions actually. We said, who's a logistics manager? Show of hands. Who's a supply chain manager in the value stream somewhere? Okay. Oh. Who's in packaging materials? ERP. Who does ERP? Who does trucks? See, this is interesting supply chain conference, isn't it? When there's no supply chain experts or people out in the audience. So obviously, I hope you've come to learn a few things. Okay, but we're open to some questions now. Can we please take a question from down this side? Please introduce yourself before the question.
My name is Sujit Malik, and I'm from the government sector. My question, it's not exactly a question, I want to add a little bit. What Dr. Sinha said in the beginning, that the innovation is best manifested only when the satisfaction level of the end consumer gets enhanced. I mean, it could have been put in any better way. While fully agreeing with that, Dr. Sinha, one more aspect is probably the inventory management. Reducing the size of inventory at various levels. What our organization is trying to do is trying to network the storage sheds or the warehouses so that the size of inventory gets reduced, both in terms of the range and to some extent in terms of the depth as well. So that every product doesn't need to be stored at every location in the warehouses. With the help of some kind of enterprise solutions, so that it can be provisioned or it can be resourced from the required warehouse in a time efficient and the effort efficient manner. Probably to me it feels your last point toward the sustainability will also get addressed in some manner with the help of this networking, the innovation at the warehouse level as well. Thank you.
Okay, so thanks very much. Just touching on some of the warehouse initiatives and the things that we spoke about, I think Dr. Rakesh was talking about fast to market, fast, people getting their orders fast. So when you talk about warehousing and something that's fast, generally it means you have a lot of tied up working capital in places all over the country. So the difficult thing is to meet this fast expectation of a lot of people.
And just one point, the consumer benefit there is fresher products. So if you buy a consumer product which is 6 months old, you may not be very happy. But if you buy a consumer product which was manufactured in the first week of February, you will be much better. So in fact, within our company, we are treating all our fast-moving consumer goods the way the food companies would treat their milk producers or the vegetable producers. So freshness of every day is important. So if a product gets sold within 27 days of manufacture, that's not as good as it getting sold within 21 days of manufacture. So the moment you start delivering fresher products to the consumer, consumers acknowledge the benefit, and that helps the company.
Any more questions? One on this side, please. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Bipin, and I'm the CEO of a company called iOrbit Digital Technologies, and we are in the area of, the omni-channel integration. So a lot of very interesting thoughts. First of all, my friend Neil that I just met, and RF, right? We agree with you that, having things not work and accepting it as it is probably the first impediment to, solving problems. I think probably we should have taken a more zero tolerance approach of saying that if that doesn't work, the talk doesn't start, right? That would have been a much more rigid way to do it, but probably we need to get there as a country in general. But the questions in general, right? The first one, I think I liked Dr. Rakesh's discussions on the innovation. Incremental innovation always has to, the rubber needs to hit the road for innovation to really take off, right? So I'd like to hear your perspectives in terms of how companies like Godrej, the big guys, right? How do you really support and foster such initiatives so that, smaller companies have the opportunity to innovate and then to be able to see their innovations really take off on the ground, right? How do you really create that ecosystem and how does that happen? And because I believe initiatives like these, right, should bring that ecosystem closer because it's only then that the integration truly happens. Right? So I'd like to hear your perspective, sir.
Yeah, so in when we look at our own performance within the company across all the levels, the key things that we focus on are flexibility of the supply chain, the speed of response, and the sustainability, the three things that I mentioned there. Surprisingly, if you hear my talks anywhere, and some of you have heard me multiple times, in none of my talks you'll find cost coming anywhere. Unfortunately, most of the supply chain managers are optimizing cost. The moment you optimize cost, you give up on flexibility, you give up on speed of response. The beauty is, if you optimize the agility, then your cost will be the lowest. And by cost, I mean the total cost of running the supply chain. So it's the other way around. We are focused on agility. Freshness, as I mentioned, is one of the performance metric for everybody, that for each of the products, whether it's getting delivered within 27 days to 26 days to 25 days. So freshness is an important part. How fast can we respond to the demand coming from our customers? If earlier we were responding within 48 hours, can we respond within 24 hours now? Can we respond the same day? So those 2-3 parameters are very important. And what percentage of demand can we fulfill? Obsolescence, for example, is one of the parameters. And if we focus on obsolescence, then everything in the back-end supply chain falls in place. If you see in FMCG, the typical obsolescence levels for the best run companies are around 2% of sales, and moderate companies would have around 4 to 5% of sales. Much before we started the TOC journey, we were also at 2% of sales. In the first phase of implementation, we went down to 1% of obsolescence, and the latest figure is 0.1%. So the moment you focus on some of these metrics rather than quality, cost, and delivery, which are really the passé way of measuring supply chain performance, all the things fall in place. It's really what you are driving in the organization.
Okay, thank you. Good, great answer as well. Quite interesting. I think cost is the first thing on everybody's mind when they start discussing optimization of some description. Okay, so Arif, you've got a comment?
So I have one point on the cost element, and I completely agree with what Dr. Rakesh says. There's this concept that corporates have been talking about, which is the total logistics cost or total cost of supply chain. Unfortunately, our buying behavior continues to remain, at line level, where we are actually buying either freight or we're buying a trip cost. We are not looking at the total cost. Unless and until we start looking at the total cost, and probably we haven't yet found a way to accumulate, most of the corporates have not found a way to accumulate and consolidate the total cost of logistics, for example. Let's just take logistics for an example. So they are enabled to associate various elements of expenses to the total logistics cost. And unfortunately, till you continue to see the logistics cost as a commodity cost, buying freight, buying a trip, buying a here to there, till you continue to see this as your logistics cost, I don't think that major improvements are going to take place, because you will keep negotiating that, and therefore you will continue to try to reduce your freight cost. However, you may have been successful in reducing the freight cost, but the overall logistics spend, overall supply chain cost may have still gone up. Because you would have probably buying a low quality truck, you'll buy a low quality service provider, you will not have all the other elements of the supply chain integrated, information may not be available, and so on and so forth. So I think it's important for us to completely shift from seeing line level cost to total cost. And that's the one fundamental thing that's going to make a big difference in overall improving the overall service delivery of the supply chain.
Yeah, good, thanks. I think this end-to-end costing understanding is a crucial element for everything. Okay, we have just one more question here, and then we'll have to finish, please. Thank you.
Good afternoon all, this is Mahesh from TVS Motor. I have a question for Dr. Rakesh Sinha. Sir, you are looking after, full end-to-end supply chain. So, like you said, the freshness and flexibility. So there are three aspects. One is planning, demand planning. Another is flexibility in production and distribution. So in that case, where to focus on the inventory of input part or the reach to the market? Because you are saying you have to be agile and the freshness of product. That means you are focusing more, the availability, the speed that you are talking. So my question is simple. We should focus on inventory of input or inventory of your product.
I think my response would be the only place to focus is the consumer, nowhere else. If the consumer is getting what he wants, the time that he or she wants, then everything backward will fall in place. The demand planning, the production planning, the procurement planning, everything will fall in place. If we take our eyes off the consumer and look at these separately, that's where the problem starts. And I agree with Arif about the total cost model. Just one point to keep in mind, the most important element of cost is often missing. I would say 99% of the cases it's missing, and that's the opportunity cost of lost demand. So if you are fulfilling 95% of the demand, that additional 5% of sales and roughly 40 to 50% of gross margin that you make, that's the cost of not supplying. And the moment you reduce that 5% of lost sales to 1% of lost sales, any cost that you incur in the supply chain is going to be much, much lower. And the moment you incorporate the opportunity cost of lost sales and its impact on profit, you have hit the nail on that.
But sir, there is a trade-off, right? You said opportunity cost.
It's no trade-off. We have done that for improving from 95% to 99% service levels. Even if we keep 400 crores extra inventory, it's still going to be beneficial. That's all. And we normally operate around 300 crores of inventory in the entire, even if we double the inventory.
In the fulfilling the customer demand, like to increase the service level, you will be having good stock. But suppose the demand is fluctuating and you are having a flexible line, but capacity is not abundant. It's not infinite.
Correct.
So that demand will suddenly, the pull will come. Then demand planning will say, I want this.
Yeah.
Then the input part will say, no, I can give this, I cannot give this.
Yeah.
Then operations will say, I have the flexibility to make this. So this is a vicious circle.
So we need to carry this flexibility in all parts of the supply chain, end to end. So flexibility in manufacturing can come without additional cost if you focus on things like SMED. I think being from an automobile company, you would know about SMED. So the moment you apply SMED to the manufacturing lines, the cost of flexibility becomes zero. So you can make your lines flexible. You can create excess capacity in the line without incurring capex through concepts like debottlenecking of capacity. So once you apply TOC principles in and out at every stage, all these improvements in flexibility come at zero cost.
Okay.
The question is not to incur cost to build flexibility, but find out ways and means and apply tools and techniques to get that additional flexibility at zero cost, and sometimes even at cost saving.
Yeah. Thank you.
And that's supply chain management. Okay, that's what you're there for. Okay, Giovanni,
Can I
got one.
yeah, I'll just add. So again, I just want to take a cue from what Dr. Sinha said and just give you a perspective. I want you to again go back to the word integrated. and the word holistic. So when we are looking at your question about where should I start or where should I focus, inventory management, demand planning, input material, the whole idea of supply chain innovation is we need to look at the entire system. So starting with what and how much and when the customer wants which product, doing an entire backward planning, scheduling in terms of how much inventory to keep at each node, and aligning it all the way to production, and then aligning it all the way to the supplier. So I would urge all supply chain managers to form integrated teams rather than having a procurement team. So there is a reason why there is a typical organization structure, right? There's a purchase team, there's a production team. But now we work in supply chains. So when you work in supply chains, you're looking at demand management, you're looking at supply management, and then the interplay of these two. So my request time and again to all of you is, do not work within the silos of your departments. Not just purchase, not just procurement, not just distribution planning, whether from cost or service perspective, but rather have a dialogue, even with sales. Involve sales people in supply chain meetings. Be present in sales meetings. So when a supply chain manager goes into a sales meeting, he is really able to understand the reason for the demand variability. Yes, we know demand is variable. What is the reason for that? When you sit in a sales meeting, you will come to know. When sales people sit in your meeting, they will come to know your constraints in manufacturing or procurement or capacity or line balancing. So it is through this common dialogue where you can actually have a seamless integrated view of the entire supply chain and achieve very high availability of product. Your target should not be less than 100%. Anything less than 100% is unacceptable.
So introduce SNOP.
Yes, introduce SNOP.
Introduce SNOP. If you haven't, you should do. Thanks.
You should do that. So that's my last bit. And
okay, good lead into SNOP. Thank you very much. And I'd just like to say thank you very much to